Looking back, the GameCube era was such a unique time in Nintendo history. Everything just feels full of charm and oozes that early 2000s vibe. Even more unusual is just how different the games feel compared to the originals and previous consoles. Every game that was a sequel added some new mechanic and completely changed the series' typical formula. Mario Kart Double Dash, Super Mario Sunshine, Metroid Prime, Super Smash Bros. Melee, Kirby Air Ride, and more. We also got a crap ton of new franchises too, like Pikmin, Luigi's Mansion, Chibi Robo, and Animal Crossing. The early 2000s were just such a huge contrast from the kind of stale, reused formulas they were known for in the 2010s. And although I think Nintendo has been getting back into the groove of being creative in the Switch era, I still think that the GameCube era surpasses it in that regard. In line with mostly everything else on the Cube, its Zelda title is also extremely distinct from any other. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. It might not be extremely underrated or overhated like Majora's Mask or Skyward Sword, but like most GameCube games, I feel like it's slightly overlooked. Without further ado though, let's begin, and I'm playing the Wii U version, hence undermining this whole intro. I are smart. I have mixed opinions of the beginning hours of Wind Waker. Although the first part of the game is excellent. You get this opening storybook-like introduction with a heavy medieval feel. It retells an abridged version of the story of Ocarina of Time and how Link put an end to the dark days of Ganon. But the story doesn't end there, as many years later after the events of Ocarina of Time, Ganon comes back, but Link does not, leaving the gods with no choice but to cause a great flood to Hyrule. The people move to the highest mountaintops to survive, while Ganon and his forces are buried beneath the waves, at least it seems. Centuries go by, and the tales of Hyrule become nothing more than legends. And then we're taken to the present on a small island named Outset, which I really never understood the meaning of as a kid, well, early teen actually, but never mind. Anyway, the Link of Wind Waker starts off as a fairly normal kid, with a sister named Ariel, a grandma, and dead parents, because of course he does. Today votes his birthday, and not only that, but he's now come of age, and in this culture it's custom to dress up like the hero of time when a boy hits that age, so he does. In my opinion, the first hour or so of the adventure is a fairly good tutorial chapter. While there are a few required tutorials here and there, most of the information about how to play the game you get from choosing to talk to people, and if you already know about how to do a lot of stuff, you can just skip a lot of stuff. There's also this peaceful, this is my home kind of feel I get, at least for a while, because a strange giant bird comes by, dropping a strange blonde-haired girl into the forest. When you rescue her, she really doesn't seem to be grateful at all, barely even acknowledging Link's existence. This right here is me when I do anything nice for anyone ever. Her name is Tetra, she's the leader of a band of pirates, and even her main man is shocked by her disregard. Not only that, but the bird thinks that Link's sister is the girl and takes her away. Talk about an eventful day and a crappy birthday too. Even after everything, the pirates still refuse to help Link until the local mailman comes around and guilt trips them, and then they take Link to the place Ariel was taken, the Forsaken Fortress. This place might just be my personal least favorite Zelda dungeon of all time. Why? Well, you know how every Zelda has to have a stealth section? Well, Wind Waker has one right from the start. In every other Zelda, if they have stealth sections and dungeons, they're in the middle or end of the game, not the beginning. I mean, to be fair though, it's not as bad as, let's say, Majora's Mask or Ocarina of Time, but you have to hide in barrels, walk slowly, and not let anyone see you, or else you lose minutes of progress. You also don't get to fight enemies almost at all since you lose your sword, and the only way to be able to fight is if you find these clubs inside of jars, which you can't even take with you in other rooms. Although it's not quite as bad as I remember it, because I managed to get through the Forsaken Fortress without getting caught once this time, but my main problem with it isn't how difficult it is, just how it's not exactly a great thing to start the game off on. I wonder how many people stopped playing around this point because of the Forsaken Fortress. It's a real shame if they did, because the game gets way better as it goes on. Anyway, you finally get your sword back and make it to the jail cell to save Ariel, but the plot would be kind of anticlimactic if you rescued her then and now, so Link instead gets caught by the giant bird owned by a familiar face. Now, Ganondorf really screws up here because instead of just cutting off his head or hanging him or something, he just tells his bird to throw him into the sea to kill him. Anyway, my nitpicking aside, I love how he's introduced. He doesn't say anything. You barely get to see what he looks like, and a lot of people playing this for the first time might not even know who he is unless they played another Zelda game. Also, his design is awesome too, but let's get back to Link almost dying. Link is saved by the King of Red Lions, a sentient boat. Well, I mean, at least at this point of the game, that's what you're led on to believe. Anyway, he gives some more detail on what's going on, who Ganondorf is, and how Link is the hero who can stop him. One mystery that's unsolved, and I really don't mean to sound nitpicky here, but how does the King of Red Lions get Link to Windfall Island? He says you can't get Link to where he needs to go without a sail, but in the same sentence he says that somehow he took Link here. The only explanation I can think of is him moving there extremely slowly without a sail, and he just needs a sail to sail anywhere fast without taking days to get there or something. Who knows, and it really doesn't matter to anyone but me. At least now that Forsaken Fortress is out of the way, the game starts to pick up a bit. This island is just a town, basically being a Kakariko village of Wind Waker. That song in the background always makes me feel good, and honestly, whenever I think of a pre-industrial city, this tune plays in my head. It's also home to some of the strangest Zelda characters, which is saying a lot, like this creepy old dude, this delusional middle-aged woman, this Elvis knockoff dancing around his grave, and most of all, Tingle. He's way creepier than he was in Wind Waker. First of all, he's locked in jail when you find him, and later on in the game, he and his brothers have their own private island where he forces them to work. And by brothers, I mean slaves. Anyway, you get the sail, and now need to go to a place called Dragon Roost Island to collect the first of 3 magical pearls. But before I do, let's take a brief break from the story elements and just talk about the gameplay itself. So much has been improved upon from Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, especially the controls. Link moves a lot more precisely, although I think a lot of it has to do with how much better the GameCube controller is than the N64 controller in their control sticks. Link can crawl around anywhere, grab onto ropes and swing around, can huddle to the wall to get across narrow ledges, and can do some neat sword tricks. Additionally, this was also the first 3D Zelda to have a controllable camera. Before that, you could only center the camera behind you, but here a player gets almost complete freedom on what camera angle they want. Because of this, there aren't many instances where you make a mistake because you can't see where something is or misjudge distances. And then there's the graphics. They are beautiful. I love the way everything looks. At this time, the cartoony graphical style wasn't very popular, but now it's one of the best things about it. They have aged fantastically. Characters' facial expressions have so much charm to them, and with how weird and unique each character looks, it's hard not to fall in love with this game. In fact, this is the only Zelda I think my family has ever had any remote interest in. I even tried to have my cousin play for this once, and although she stopped playing around Dragon Roost Island, it still brings back fun memories. Speaking of that, let's get back to the place. The music will sound familiar if you've ever played Brawl, unless you've never unlocked Toon Link. Anyway, this island is home of the Rito, who are the descendants of the Zora. Yeah, they evolved wings and pretty much have no resemblance to the Zora, but I would have honestly thought it'd been funnier if they evolved from Kuka or something, but oh well. These guys have been facing troubles of their own. The guardian of the island is a giant dragon Valoo, but lately, he's been going through some kind of great pain. The Rito have a ritual where the young have to go up to Valoo to get their wings, but with Valoo being in the state he is, the chieftain's son can't go on his pilgrimage to get his wings. So you have to go into the volcano atop the island, find out what's going on up there. However, one islander stands out among the rest, Medley. She's the attendant of the chieftain's son and really wants to help out. Her personality is calm, she's respectful, and just pleasant overall. It's no wonder why she's a fan favorite, although I still honestly don't even know how old she's even supposed to be. I mean, I'm pretty sure she's around the same age as Link, but with her high-ranking job and calm demeanor, I really wouldn't be surprised if he's like 20 or whatever in Rito years. Alright, now for the cavern itself, which is the first real dungeon of the game. Wind Waker's dungeons are really fun, with a lot of great additions to polish the flaws and annoying aspects of them. For example, I think we all remember how annoying it is to take a break from a temple and have to backtrack to the point you left off. Well, Wind Waker solved this by adding these pots that work as teleporters. One of them can be found at the start of a dungeon, and another is usually towards the end. When you finally reach one of the end pots, jump into it and return to the start. And now if you jump into that pot, you can now return to the spot you just came from. The gameplay mechanics are also very refined compared with the N64 games. Most puzzles are pretty straightforward, and there's not a monotonous amount of work to get through, at least not in the early ones. The dungeon item of Dragon Roost is the grappling hook, which is a bit different than the hook shot, as instead of using it to shoot and get pulled somewhere, the hook wraps around a pole or something and then you can swing around. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I kind of find it more fun to use than the hook shot. Well, at least when there's not enemies flying around you and we have to swing somewhere. So the reason why Valu's been so angry as of late is because of this monster that's been pulling on his tail. Which is understandable, but it could have tried to communicate somehow what was going on at least. Anyway, you fight the boss, everything returns to normal, and you get the first pearl. The next destination is Forest Haven. It's also home to an evolved people from a previous Zelda game, this time being the Kokiris. I mean, it's not as cool of a transition from Zoras to Burrito, but they're pretty adorable. There's a new Great Deku Tree here as well, only much creepier than any other version in the whole series. I can't be the only one who finds them creepy, can I? Or at least uncanny. Well, in any case, one of the Koroks, which are the evolved version of the Kokiri that I forgot to mention before, but anyway, one of them named Makar falls into the Forbidden Woods, and Link has to go save him. The dungeon is honestly one of my least favorites in the game. For whatever reason, I always seem to have a lot of trouble on it, despite it being one of the easiest in the game. And once you rescue Makar, the Great Deku Tree gives you the second pearl, and it's off to find the third one. Alright, now that the first two dungeons are out of the way, the game becomes way more fun, and it's honestly one of those games that just keeps getting better as it goes on. The main gimmick of Wind Waker, and the thing that I probably should have mentioned earlier but didn't want there to be a whole lot of story stuff in a row, is sailing. There are dozens and dozens of islands scattered throughout the world, some being important, others being there just to hold a piece of heart or something. Sailing from place to place just feels great. It's like an adventure, and it makes you feel like an old explorer from the 1700s or whatever. Along the way, you might find treasure beneath the waves. Some of it pops up randomly as small white lights, and others need a treasure chart to be found. You get these like pieces of heart or other items for winning certain minigames and dungeons, etc. They usually lead to either rupees or pieces of heart, but to be honest, I'm not super crazy for them because it just adds another step in the way of getting another piece of heart. The other core mechanic of the game is in the title, the Wind Waker. It works similar to the Ocarina of Time, and with it you can do things like change the time of day, use a cyclone to teleport, or change the direction of the wind. Yeah, about that. You see, to sail anywhere fast, you have to move in the same direction as the wind. And if the wind is blowing the opposite direction of you, it takes forever to get anywhere. This means the player has to play the Wind Waker to change the wind direction all the time, which gets kind of annoying after a while. I mean, it doesn't ruin the game or anything, it's just a little annoying at worst. Thankfully, the Wii U remake added a new item to fix this problem, the Swift Sail. With it, the player can sail around anywhere they want regardless of the wind and move faster too. However, I actually didn't use it outside of trying it out to see what it's like, mostly because just how much it breaks the game, and I wanted to play as faithful to the original as possible, and also because of the icon that never goes away. Yeah, I know it's a minor issue, but I really have OCD issues when it comes to stuff like that. Other than that, the Wind Waker is a bit trickier, but also sort of more fun to use in the Ocarina. Instead of just pressing the C buttons in a certain order, you need to press the right stick a certain direction when that note plays. Well, kind of, it's hard to explain. And then you can also use the left stick to change a number of notes. The Wind Waker is complicated and maybe even annoying to use at first. But once I got used to it, I really started to enjoy using it. There's a certain fluent control feel to it, if that makes any sense, that the Ocarina never really accomplished. Sailing around at night or during a storm might just be one of the most relaxing experiences I've ever had playing a Zelda game. That calm vibe just soothes my soul. The ambience in the background, sounds of rain, it brings out an instinct deep within me. Add on top of that all the mystery around the various islands and objects scattered throughout it, it really immerses you. Like I said earlier, the first time I played this game, I didn't enjoy it that much at first, even after the Forsaken Fortress. It's around this point though, after Forbidden Woods, that I started to really have fun. It's one of those memories I can still vividly remember. It was like mid-July 2017, around 7 or 8 o'clock at night. I was eating a frosted cookie from a bakery and just falling in love with the game all at once. I never before had my opinions of a game flip almost 180 like that so fast, and I haven't had it happen since. Cozy memories aside, the sea has a lot of not so relaxing elements too, like sharks and battleships. Fighting them, however, isn't worth the player's time at all, since the only way to fight them is with bombs, and as far as I'm aware, they don't really drop anything good either. The scariest things on a sea though are these guys, big octos, or as I always call them until like the day I die, bloopers. Yeah, no, they're not bloopers, but come on, they look like it. There might be only like 6 in the whole ocean, but running into one can scare the shit out of you. The only warning sign is that there's like a few seagulls hovering on a spot in the ocean. Cross that spot and one emerges from the deep. These aren't your typical boss fights either. Instead of the Octos attacking Link, they just sit there and do nothing, except create a giant vortex to suck you up. The player needs to attack its eyes, either with bombs or a boomerang until it dies, and if they take too long, it's game over. Item-wise, this game's not too shabby either, with most of the typical weapons making a comeback. Bombs, the hook shot, the bow and mirror shield, and then there's all the new items, like the before mentioned grappling hook, the Deku Leaf which lets you glide, and a telescope which you'll never use for the whole game. Additionally, some weapons and items that are kinda mediocre in previous entries are heavily buffed here. The hammer is able to flatten enemies. The boomerang can target multiple foes at once instead of being a crappy version of the hookshot, and iron boots can now be equipped to a button, saving the player a lot of hassle compared to Ocarina of Time. I think the variety of items is probably one of the biggest strengths of the game. Each one has a specific purpose. Most of them are still used in a lot of spots, even towards the end of the game, but there's not too many that it gets confusing to figure out what does what, like in Twilight Princess. On top of that, most of the upgrades aren't difficult to obtain either, as all of the bomb bag, wallet, and quiver upgrades are obtained from finding great fairies, and thank God they changed their designs. Other than the Swift Sail, Wind Waker HD is a bit different from the GameCube original, the biggest difference being the visual changes. The graphics are a lot brighter, the game plays in 1080p instead of 480p, and everything is just a lot smoother. Everything just looks a lot more real than in the GameCube version. And speaking of which, the GameCube version still looks phenomenal for being 20 years old. There's a lot of disagreement on which one fans think looks better, and a lot of them think that HD looks a little washed out. But most people, including myself, prefer the Wii U version, and after playing it, it won't be easy going back to the original. After the visual changes, the second biggest change is with the Wii U gamepad. It can act as a secondary screen to view the map of the sea and change items. And if you don't have a TV, you could always play with the game on the gamepad in sweet 240p. Other than with getting the footage for the video, and for a brief period of time at the start of my playthrough of the game, I didn't use the gamepad to play at all, and instead used a Pro Controller. I mean, I don't hate the gamepad or anything, but it's so bulky, its battery life sucks, and honestly with how expensive a replacement would be, I'm kind of scared of wearing it down, so yeah. The only reason I was even using it in the beginning was so I could play the game with headphones in. Unfortunately though, most of the sounds don't even come out of the gamepad unless you play it in off the TV mode, which is really annoying. The rest of the changes in HD are fairly minor quality of life improvements. such as being able to carry more rupees. Certain items like the Wind Waker move to the D-pad instead of being equipped to buttons like other items. Song melodies only play the first time after reopening a save file when you play them, and most glitches were fixed. One major aspect that I haven't mentioned yet, but I probably would have if I made this video like before 2017, is the Tingle Bottle. It allows you to send messages in bottles to other players on Miiverse, which got shut down like 6 years ago, meaning as of right now, more time has passed between Miiverse shutting down and now than between the release of HD and Miiverse shutting down. And that's crazy to think about. Alright, that's enough gameplay aspects for now. Let's get back to the story. The third pearl is back on Outset Island inside a cave, but to get inside you need bombs. They can be found in Windfall, only the pirates got there first, and are holding the bomb shop guy hostage. I don't feel sorry for him though, because he charged literal impossible prices for his bombs. Anyway, the pirates are trying to get to the pearl too. However, Tetra shows some character development, or something, as when she catches Link eavesdropping, she lets him not only get away, but lets her crew have a night out to let Link get to it first. The guardian for this one is this fish deity, Jaboon, and thankfully you don't have to go inside of him this time to get the third pearl. And with all the pearls collected, it's time for the grand trial, the Tower of the Gods. With a name like that, I think everyone assumes it's gonna be hard and painful, but it's actually pretty easy. You get to do some cool stuff at least, like bring statues to life and control them, while Link looks like he's trying to learn telekinesis or something. The boss is pretty cool though, and after beating it, Link rings a strange bell that opens a portal in the sea. This portal leads down to Hyrule, only everything seems to be frozen in time. In a secret chamber is the Master Sword, and with it, it's now time to go back to the fortress. This trip though is infinitely easier than the first one. You no longer have to worry about trying to sneak past the guards, and instead face everything in battle. Other than that, almost nothing is different than the first time, which is a bit strange because I remember the second visit being really large and intimidating. At the top, Ariel is still there, and Link gets direct help this time from the pirates. Tetra's personality really starts to shine here, giving Link a hard time at rushing in without thinking about anything, yet being friendly towards him without being condescending like before. She even starts to realize just who Link is, before leaving with the escaped prisoners, while Link stays behind to take care of the giant bird in Ganondorf. Defeating the bird goes pretty well, while taking on Ganondorf doesn't go so well. Link gets beaten up badly since the Master Sword has lost a lot of its power, but Tetra attempts to save the day, but also gets beaten easily. However, Tetra's old family necklace reacts with Ganondorf's Triforce of power. This can only mean one thing, that she's the reincarnation of Zelda. Link and Tetra are just barely able to escape from Ganondorf's grasp, from a last-minute rescue from the Rito and Valoo. After this, the King of Red Lions takes the two back to Hyrule, and for this part, Tetra follows you around, which is kinda cute to be honest. Unfortunately, it doesn't last long. In the same chamber as the Master Sword, we meet the King of Hyrule, the true identity of the King of Red Lions. This is also one of those things that took me a while to understand as a kid / early teen / when I was 15. I don't know if I'd say I was a kid or a teen yet, but anyway. The king has the other half of the Triforce that is in Tetra's necklace, and then she transforms. This is what every little girl wants to happen to them as kids, or as teenagers, or adults, or anything, honestly. Although, to be honest, I like Tetra a lot more in her pirate form instead of her Zelda form. She looks a lot more distinguished and cooler and more unique. Even her personality becomes a lot more dull, at least for a while. And I know what a lot of people might be thinking right now watching this. Well, by a lot, I mean like all 5 people are gonna click on this, but you're probably thinking, at least one of you, this is kind of racist. Well, not really. It's more Tetra's just really tan from being out in the sun all the time, and her getting paler is, I guess, what she'd look like if she was a princess and stayed indoors all the time, or something, but I don't really want to have to explain this racial stuff, so, yo, just look at GameFAQs post or something, I don't know. Tetra stays behind, and the goal now is to find out what happened to the Master Sword to make it lose its power. As it turns out, it's from Ganondorf killing the sages. One is the only Zora you'll ever meet in the whole game, and the other is actually what I designed my crappy avatar off of. So if you're ever curious about that, which I bet you weren't, there you go. To restore the power of the Master Sword, new sages have to be found, both of them being characters you met before, Medley and Muthahir. You need to take both of them to their respective temples so they can take the place of the dead sages, both of which have some fun moments and some not so fun moments. The Earth Temple is a temple Link takes Medley to. It's the creepy dungeon of the game full of re-deads, which annoy me to no end. Especially when you play the game late at night and wake up your family, and then your mom hears a scream sound, and long story short, I had to use to play this dungeon on mute. The cool aspect is the ability to play as Medley. She can fly for a short period of time, and works with Link to do mirror shield puzzles, and it can be fun at times. The Wind Temple, on the other hand, is my least favorite dungeon in the whole game after Forsaken Fortress. Muthahir sucks compared to Medley, and so much of the temple relies on riding gusts of wind. When both the new sages are anointed, it's time for the final fight. Well, almost, because there's one more thing the player has to do before taking on Ganondorf, the Triforce quest. Ah yes, the infamous Triforce quest, what many view as the Achilles heel of Wind Waker. You see, this game was kind of rushed, and as such, there are only 2 main temples instead of the usual 4 to 5. The developers realized that the game was fairly short, especially towards the end. So what did they do? Well, they made some filler, where Link has to collect all 8 pieces of the Triforce of Courage. These pieces are scattered throughout the Great Sea, but to find them, you need to get Triforce charts. On certain islands, you can find these charts and then take them to Tingle to pay him a lot of rupees to decipher them. Then you can use the chart to track them down around the ocean. The Wii U version cut down the amount of charts from 8 to 3, and the other 5 shard locations are wherever charts were in the GameCube version. Now, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I actually sort of enjoy the Triforce quest. Well, I do like all the temples, well, not all of them, like all except for the Wind Temple, but I guess it's a okay, I guess I only like one of the actual temples, but dungeons like most of them except for Wind Temple and Forsaken Fortress. Anyway, I will like all of that most of the time. I personally have more fun taking on small side quests, which is probably why I like Majora's Mask so much. Now, not every Triforce piece is fun to track down, specifically the one in the Savage Labyrinth. Have you ever played the Pit of 100 Trials and Fails Near Your Door Super Paper Mario? Well, that's basically what this is, only a lot shorter, only being 50 floors, and the Triforce shard is on the 30th. My favorite thing about this whole quest is the ghost ship. On different nights, a ghostly ship appears near a specific island. Now, while you can't board the ship to find a shard until you get a special chart to help you track it down, you can run into it as soon as leaving Windfall Island. Imagine if you have no idea that the ship even exists, and then running into it randomly. That would be terrifying. When the player collects every shard, they can now go into Hyrule again. But there's a few little small things that I haven't mentioned yet, and I really think add a lot to the game. For starters, Wind Waker is by far the easiest 3D Zelda game in my opinion to get all the heart pieces in. Most of them are super easy to get. Some are kind of cryptic, but with an internet guide, very few of them are much of a hassle to collect. Like I said earlier, a lot of them are found for getting treasure charts, and these charts that lead to the heart pieces also aren't too hard to obtain except for a few. Because almost every dungeon has a treasure chart inside it that leads to a heart piece. I mean, they aren't easy to miss or anything, but it can get annoying having to make sure you grab one before leaving, because there's nothing worse than having to re-enter a dungeon again just to find a treasure chart or something. The hardest piece to get in the whole game, and the only one I was actually kind of scared I might not be able to get, is the one you get by hitting Orca 500 times without getting hit more than twice. Not only is it tough, but just boring too, and incredibly frustrating if you lose, since it takes minutes and minutes of combos to come close to getting 500 blows in. The trick is to find a groove where there's enough distance between the two, and then just give him 1 or 2 blows, backflip, and then repeat until you win. The other minigames are a lot of fun though. There's this battleship one, this cannon one, this gliding one, and an auction. Well, actually, maybe not that last one, actually. The guy hosting the first two has to be one of the strangest Zelda characters of all time, which again is saying a lot. Before the minigame starts, he has this boring, depressed personality, but then becomes weird when it begins. And I wouldn't visit him at night either. Alright, one last thing, and then we'll move on to the endgame. On Windfall, there's a rich guy and a homeless guy. Each of them have daughters that got kidnapped alongside Ariel. However, after the Forsaken Fortress is beaten, the two have a role reversal. Milla, the daughter of the rich guy, now has to work for a local stall shop, and doesn't like it at all. She resorts to trying to steal from her boss, and if Link catches her, she basically tells him her whole life story, about how much everything's been sucking for her, and you do have to feel at least a little sorry for her. After letting her go, she gives you an empty bottle, so that's neat. Once back in Hyrule, Zelda/Tetra immediately gets kidnapped because of course she does. Ganondorf takes her to his castle. Link has to rescue her the whole 9 yards. Like the Triforce quest, his castle feels kind of incomplete. The first phase is basically a boss rush, which is just pointless filler that really isn't much fun. I mean, I really hate when games do stuff like this because I already played through the game once. Like, why would I beat all these bosses, why would I want to beat them again, unless it's like an optional mode or something. The second part is one of those mazes where you need to memorize which way to go, like Lost Woods. And if you know what you're doing, it's fairly easy too, aka just looking up a guide online. And then after that, there are only a few enemies to fight before reaching the end. I mean, I'm not too big of a fan when it comes to last dungeons in games in general, but this one especially feels meh. The cutscene while confronting Ganondorf is creepy. I mean, the dude is literally in bed with a teenager. You know, I'm recording this next to someone else in the next room over. I really hope they didn't hear me say it, because I'm gonna get a question tomorrow morning. But yeah, for the longest time I thought that Ganondorf legitimately, okay, they're not dead. Okay, I can say it. For the very longest time I thought Ganondorf legitimately raped Tetra. So yeah, quite an unsettling start. And thank God I don't think they're in the room right now. Okay, I could. Remember how in Ocarina of Time you fought Ganondorf in human form, then his beast form? Well, here it's reversed, with the first battle being him in his odd Chinese puppet form. It has multiple phases, and while it's not difficult, it is annoying to deal with. The only way to defeat it is with light arrows to the tail, which is easier said than done with how fast he moves. Once it's over, he takes Tetra to the top of his tower, and then the true final fight begins. Ganondorf actually manages to defeat Link and take his Triforce of Courage, and along with Zelda's Triforce of Wisdom and his Triforce of Power, he's able to reunite the Triforce. With it, he can have any wish he desires, although like at the start of the game, he screws up again, big time. He states his wish for power to rule everything, but forgets that he actually has to touch the Triforce. The King of Hyrule then touches it himself and wishes for Hyrule to be flooded again. The whole scene kinda reminds me about one time in DBZ when Frieza tries to wish for immortality, but it doesn't get granted because he doesn't speak Namekian, and then his wish gets stolen by Dende. That aside, there's something about Ganondorf laughing here after the king makes his wish that makes this moment stand out. I mean, his plans are dashed for good, and the actual fight is less about stopping him from carrying out his plan, and more about stopping him from killing you as a consolation prize. The battle is truly one of the greatest on the GameCube. The background, the tension, the fast-paced action, and focus on sword fighting, it's all there. While it does have multiple phases, they kinda blend into each other, which means no fake-out victories or anything. In the first phase, Link and Tetra work together to fight Ganon. Tetra fires light arrows, and your goal is to move around so they hit him, and then slice and dice. In Phase 2, Ganondorf knocks out Tetra, so Link has to face him by himself, and then Zelda wakes up by the end. In the final phase, he starts dodging Zelda's arrows no matter what, so what you need to do is to line the two of them up correctly so you can deflect an arrow off of your shield and then hit Ganon. Man, this is violent. It feels kinda out of place since not even Twilight Princess or Majora's Mask have this level of carnage. Him turning to stone only makes this slightly less gruesome. The king does some reflecting, and what's honestly one of my favorite moments in the series, how he can't leave the past behind and compares himself to Ganondorf. All he desires is for Link and Tetra to live for the future. And despite Tetra and Link asking him to come along with him, as Hyrule floods and Link reaches his hand down to save him, the king doesn't let him and drowns along with his kingdom. Link and Tetra wash up on the surface, and now she's back to looking like she was before. The two get rescued by the pirates, and pretty much everyone's okay. Medley, Makar, Ariel, everyone. What I like about this ending is how it's not mindlessly happy, and hunky-dory and all that. The king literally just died a few minutes ago, for crying out loud. And yet this happy ending feels deserved. It leaves the player off with hope for the future, as Link and Tetra join up together to explore the sea. And that was The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. A great game with some moderate flaws here and there. The story, characters, and overall world are spectacular. After the N64 games, I think this is the Zelda world I would get the most immersed in and care about the most. Sailing around can be a very fun experience too, sometimes relaxing, sometimes full of action, and sometimes full of mystery. Like I said at the beginning of the video, it has that distinct GameCube feel, where everything just feels so unique and wacky. Overall, I'd say this is my third favorite Zelda game after Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, which is a very unpopular opinion, I know. While this game isn't quite hated or completely overlooked or obscure, I do wish it'd just get a bit more attention. Although a lot of it has to do with the consoles it came out for, the GameCube and Wii U, neither of which are known for their commercial success. Hopefully the HD version might get a port on the Switch or whatever comes out after it, or else enjoy paying almost $100 for it. Or you could just emulate it, which is slowly becoming the only real way to play a lot of retro games anymore. Its legacy doesn't end there, however, as a lot of future Zelda titles would emulate its character style and mechanics, including a direct sequel for the DS, The Legend of Zelda: Phantom Hourglass. And no, I'm not playing it. I mean, unless this video gets like 1,000 views or 100 likes or something. Anyway, bye. And this video honestly didn't really turn out as well as I would have liked, but you know, that's just the way things go. But I mean, the script has been, it's just a mess, and you know, at least one thing, this is the last video, at least I don't know how fast I'm gonna get it out, but this is probably gonna be the last video before my birthday. I'm turning 21, so there's that. Anyway, hope you all have a good day, and goodbye.